to function. He was that high on drugs constantly. But Paul Mooney made him what...
At 78, Jimmie Walker finally opens up about one of the most enduring questions in television history. What really happened between him and his Good Times co-star Esther Rolle? For decades, fans and critics speculated about the tension behind the scenes, why their undeniable on-screen chemistry was so often overshadowed by rumors of creative conflict. Now, in his late 70s, Walker steps out from behind the punchlines and bravado to speak candidly about the woman who helped shape not only his most iconic role, but also his understanding of purpose, art, and responsibility. This is more than a retrospective. It's a long-overdue reckoning, an honest account of fame, friction, and the fight to balance entertainment with meaning.
And say the audience stinks, the audience is no good. No, you stink.
James Carter Walker Jr., known to the world as Jimmie Walker, was born on June 25, 1947 in the Bronx, New York, a place defined by its grit, resilience, and cultural vibrancy. Growing up in the challenging environment of the South Bronx during the 1950s and 60s, Walker's early life was shaped by economic hardship and the struggles of a working-class family. His mother, Lena, was the steady force in his life, working as the head nurse at a local hospital, while his father, James Sr., drifted in and out, rarely present. This absence and instability forged in Walker a deep sense of self-reliance, discipline, and an acute awareness of the world around him. Life in the Bronx was a crash course in survival, but it was also where Jimmie's instincts for observation and humor first took root. Amid the noise and pressure of the city, he began developing the sharp, unfiltered voice that would later define his comedy. The streets educated him just as much as the classroom, teaching him how to read people, adapt quickly, and use humor as both shield and weapon. Those formative years gave Walker more than just a backstory. They gave him the raw material for a career that would resonate far beyond the neighborhoods where he got his start.
The black people and the ethnic people complained so much that from...
While many of his peers in the Bronx chased quick escapes or fell into the traps of the streets, Jimmie Walker found fascination in something unexpected: electronics. As a teenager attending Theodore Roosevelt High School, he discovered a deep curiosity for how things worked, especially radios and electrical systems. This wasn't just a passing interest. It was a spark that pushed him to enroll at the RCA Technical Institute through a federal program where he studied to become a radio engineer. In an era when few young black men from the South Bronx were given access to technical careers, Walker's path was not only unconventional, it was groundbreaking. He thrived in the meticulous world of circuits and frequencies, finding comfort in the logic and rhythm of electronics. But beneath the surface, the same precision that powered his technical studies would later fuel his comedic timing. The wiring of jokes, the modulation of voice, the perfect pause. These elements of his future performances echoed the discipline he learned from engineering. Before he ever stepped on stage, Walker was building something, an inner framework of curiosity, structure, and confidence that would serve as the invisible scaffolding of his comedy career. His journey through the world of machines didn't end when the laughter started. It quietly shaped the way he delivered every line.
Because we didn't rehearse, and the sitcoms, were maybe not as good as they could have been. And
Jimmie Walker's transition from radio engineer to comedian wasn't the result of a single moment. It was a gradual awakening to the power of laughter. In the early 1970s, drawn to the pulse of New York City's thriving nightlife and performance scene, Walker began performing stand-up comedy at local clubs. The stage quickly became his laboratory, and his voice, sharp, energetic, and deeply observational, emerged as his most potent tool. He wasn't just telling jokes. He was translating the chaos of city life, racial tension, and everyday struggle into something audiences could laugh at and relate to. His comedic style, fast-talking and unapologetically bold, resonated with a new generation of Black audiences hungry for authenticity and truth. Venues like the Apollo Theater and television programs such as The Tonight Show and Road and Martin Flaffin became launching pads for his rising star. Walker wasn't just performing, he was commanding attention, and producers began to notice. He brought with him not just punchlines, but presence, drawing people in with a combination of street-smart wit and fearless stagecraft. In the smoky clubs of New York, Jimmie Walker found more than just laughter. He found purpose, identity, and the platform that would catapult him into television history.
Thing on any stand-up, any sitcom, because the crew at any place has heard every show,
Jimmie Walker's leap into television history came with the role that would define his career, James J.J. Evans Jr., on the groundbreaking CBS sitcom Good Times. Premiering in 1974, the show was one of the first to center on a working-class black family living in the Chicago housing projects. Walker's portrayal of JJ, a lanky, high-energy, wisecracking aspiring artist, was electric. His exaggerated facial expressions, physical comedy, and signature catchphrase Dy-no-mite turned him into an overnight sensation. JJ became the Brago character, stealing scenes and capturing the hearts of viewers across the country. For audiences who had rarely seen themselves reflected on television, Walker's charisma and comedic charm offered both laughter and representation. Yet with fame came pressure. JJ's rising popularity began to shift the focus of the show, sparking internal conflicts with co-stars who believed the sitcom was veering away from its serious, socially conscious roots. Still, Walker rode the wave of stardom, his image and voice becoming synonymous with 1970s pop culture. From lunchboxes to late-night parodies, Dy-no-mite echoed far beyond the screen. Jimmie Walker had arrived, not just as a comedian or an actor, but as a symbol of a cultural moment where television and race, humor and history were colliding in real time.
Love the guy. He was a great guy, great personality, funny, sweet, but those drugs, man.
As Good Times soared in popularity, the mood behind the scenes grew increasingly complicated. While audiences celebrated the comedic brilliance of J.J. Evans, tension simmered between Jimmie Walker and his co-stars, most notably Esther Rolle and John Amos. Both actors had envisioned Good Times as a meaningful portrayal of black family life, one rooted in dignity, struggle, and resilience. Rolle, a classically trained actress, believed the show had a responsibility to uplift and represent with seriousness and authenticity. But as JJ's antics became the centerpiece, the tone shifted from socially conscious storytelling to broad comedy. Walker, whose instincts leaned toward entertainment and audience engagement, saw humor as a universal connector. To him, laughs were not a distraction, they were a vehicle. Yet for Rolle and Amos, the growing focus on JJ's exaggerated behavior felt like a retreat into stereotype, undermining the show's original mission. The creative rift bred on-set friction, and although Walker remained professional, the ideological divide was hard to bridge. These weren't just personality clashes. They were deeply rooted differences in purpose and philosophy. While the cameras captured a family united in adversity, off-camera, a quiet battle was unfolding between art and audience, substance and stardom. And at the center of it stood Jimmie Walker, balancing the weight of fame against the cost of creative compromise.
Cumulation or mix of all the acts and had something of a minor five.
When Good Times ended in 1979, Jimmie Walker faced the familiar challenge of being forever linked to a single iconic character. Typecasting loomed large, and the shadow of J.J. Evans followed him into every audition and appearance. But rather than retreat, Walker leaned into his first love, stand-up comedy. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, he crisscrossed the country, performing to packed comedy clubs and cultivating a loyal fan base who remembered him not just as a sitcom star, but as a true entertainer. He brought nostalgia and sharp timing to guest roles on shows like The Love Boat, Fantasy Island, The Drew Carey Show, and Everybody Hates Chris, often playing off his past while still pushing forward. Even as mainstream roles became harder to secure, Walker remained visible, relevant, and undeniably driven. His comedic roots gave him a lifeline, one that allowed him to stay in the public eye without compromising his voice. In an industry that often discards its past stars, Jimmie Walker found longevity by evolving, adapting, and staying true to the spark that first brought him to the stage, the love of making people laugh.
Race right now and say, we're getting together on Sunday, let's all hang out. Now, let me say this, everybody works together.
As the applause from his sitcom days faded, Jimmie Walker found a new stage. one that didn't involve scripted lines or laugh tracks. In the 2000s and beyond, he emerged as a provocative voice in political and cultural commentary, often surprising fans with his independent and conservative views. Never one to follow the crowd, Walker openly criticized affirmative action, questioned mainstream narratives on race, and resisted the expectation that he aligned with liberal Hollywood norms. His 2012 memoir, Dy-no-mite, Good Times, Bad Times, Our Times, laid bare his beliefs with the same boldness that had once powered his punchlines. That same year, during interviews on The Wendy Williams Show and The O'Reilly Factor, he revealed personal choices that defied public assumptions. He had never married or had children, and had not voted for Barack Obama, despite the historical significance. These stances drew both criticism and respect, reinforcing his identity as a fiercely individual thinker. On CNN, he described himself as a realist independent, someone who evaluated issues based on logic rather than loyalty. His willingness to voice unpopular opinions, even those that put him at odds with his own community, marked a new chapter in his public life, not just as a performer, but as a man unafraid to challenge the status quo.
Hughes, but they didn't know about Woody Allen and Mel Brooks, those type of guys who make a very good living writing and even acting, or people behind.
Even as the glitz of mainstream Hollywood began to fade from his path, Jimmie Walker never dimmed. While many of his contemporaries quietly receded into retirement or faded into obscurity, Walker chose a different route. One paved with eccentric choices, unexpected cameos, and a fearless embrace of the strange and surprising. For him, performance was never just a job. It was a calling, a rhythm he couldn't and wouldn't shake, no matter how much the industry changed around him. Then, by the 2010s, the entertainment world had shifted dramatically. Viral fame, streaming content, and niche fandoms began to redefine celebrity. And while some struggled to adapt, Walker leaned into the chaos with a grin. He began popping up in projects that defied categorization, appearing not in safe sitcom revivals or sentimental tributes, but in strange, wildly unconventional corners of pop culture that only deepened his cult appeal. In 2010, he made a surprising appearance in Big Money Rustless, a low-budget Western-themed comedy created by none other than the Insane Clown Posse, a musical duo infamous for their face paint, outlandish performances, and fiercely devoted fan base known as Juggalos. It was an odd pairing on paper, but on screen it worked. The film, dripping in absurdity and irreverent humor, gave Walker the perfect stage to play with his legacy. He didn't distance himself from the chaos. He leaned in, fully aware of how unexpected and humorous his involvement was. It wasn't about reclaiming past glory. It was about having fun with it, even poking fun at it. For Walker, this wasn't a fall from grace, it was a side quest. And he didn't stop there. The very next year, Walker dove headfirst into the realm of sci-fi camp with Super Shark, a sci-fi channel creature feature that proudly wore its ridiculousness on its sleeve. The film centered around a monstrous shark that could not only leap onto land, but also battle tanks. And Walker, as a supporting character, played his part with perfect comedic timing and a twinkle in his eye. It was cheesy, over the top, and gloriously unhinged, and Walker treated it like Shakespeare. He brought a sincerity to the role that elevated the film's nonsense into something weirdly compelling. These weren't career missteps. They were conscious, creative choices that said something about who Jimmie Walker really was. Unconcerned with prestige or public opinion, he was driven by something more personal: curiosity, joy, and the freedom to try something new. While many actors of his generation clung tightly to their most famous roles, Walker was busy exploring the outer limits of entertainment, sometimes strange, often hilarious, and always unexpected. What these performances revealed was a man not afraid of reinvention. Whether he was trading barbs in a sitcom or fighting absurd sharks on cable TV, Jimmie Walker remained magnetic because he believed in what he was doing. He didn't phone it in. He didn't play it safe. He stepped into every role, no matter how bizarre, with the same charisma and commitment that made him a star in the first place. More than anything, this phase of his career underscored a crucial truth about legacy. It's not just built in the heights of your fame, it's shaped in the choices you make when no one's watching. Walker's willingness to keep evolving, to keep experimenting, and to keep laughing, even at himself, became its own kind of artistic statement. He wasn't chasing the spotlight, he was redefining it on his own terms. And in doing so, Jimmie Walker proved that the real measure of an artist isn't how high they climb, but how boldly they continue to dance when the world isn't looking.
Helping him write his stuff and put it in order, Freddie, his act had kind of deteriorated.
Beyond the laughter, the unforgettable catchphrases, and the larger-than-life presence that defined an era of television, Jimmie Walker led a personal life that was quietly revolutionary. While audiences came to know him as the wisecracking dynamo of good times, few knew much about the man behind the performance. And that was by design. Walker wasn't just a private person. He was intentional about how he lived, what he shared, and what he withheld from public consumption. In 2012, during a refreshingly candid appearance on The Wendy Williams Show, Walker pulled back the curtain ever so slightly, and in doing so, caught many fans off guard. With his trademark blend of wit and honesty, he revealed that he had never married and had never had children. For a man who'd been in the public eye for decades, admired by millions and surrounded by fame, this admission struck a chord. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. There was no apology, no wistfulness, no hint of regret. Just a matter-of-fact, self-assured declaration. This was the life he'd had chosen. Walker explained, with a wry smile, that although he had enjoyed romantic relationships over the years, he never felt the pull toward traditional domestic life. His priorities had always leaned toward freedom, personal exploration, and a career that, while at times unpredictable, gave him a sense of purpose and momentum. Marriage and fatherhood, for many, are seen as the ultimate milestones. But for Walker, they simply weren't part of the map he chose to follow. His revelation challenged the assumptions we often project onto celebrities, especially those who, like Walker, were cultural fixtures in American households. Fans had watched him play a son, a brother, and a friend on screen. They'd perhaps imagined similar roles in his real life. But Jimmie Walker was never interested in living someone else's narrative. He chose a path that, while less conventional, felt more authentic to him. And that choice is significant. In a society that tends to equate success with settling down and happiness with having a family, Walker's lifestyle was a quiet act of rebellion. He didn't denounce the idea of marriage or children, he simply never saw it as essential to his own fulfillment. His life was built on autonomy, and he protected that independence with the same care that others might devote to building a household. What's remarkable is how scandal-free that personal life remained. While many of his peers found themselves entangled in public drama, messy divorces, or tabloid chaos, Walker kept his name out of the headlines, not because he was hiding, but because he was living exactly the life he wanted. He wasn't running from expectations. He had simply chosen not to accept them in the first place. Even as he aged out of the spotlight, Walker's clarity about who he was only sharpened. He never pretended to be something he wasn't. He didn't chase relevance or reinvent himself to match the trends. His authenticity, both on-screen and off, became his quiet legacy. He showed that a life well lived doesn't have to look like everyone else's, that solitude can be a source of strength, and that fulfillment doesn't always come in the form of a white picket fence or a family portrait. Jimmie Walker's off-camera life wasn't filled with sensational headlines, but that was the point. In an industry obsessed with image and expectation, he carved out something rare, a life on his own terms, rooted in self-awareness and driven by intentional choice. And in doing so, he offered a different kind of role model, one who reminded us that being true to yourself is the most radical success of all. Now, in his late 70s, Jimmie Walker has begun to speak more openly and honestly about one of the most significant relationships of his career, his complex, often tense dynamic with Good Times co-star Esther Rolle. For decades, speculation surrounded their off-screen interactions, rumors of conflict, creative disagreements, and personal friction. While the chemistry between their characters on screen was undeniable, behind the scenes, two very different worldviews clashed. Rolle, a classically trained actress and passionate advocate for authentic Black representation, saw Good Times as a platform for social change. Walker, by contrast, approached the show as a comedian, drawn to laughter, energy, and audience connection. He became the breakout star, but Rolle believed the shift toward JJ's exaggerated antics diluted the show's deeper purpose. For years, Walker avoided addressing the divide in public, often offering polite but vague answers. But in recent reflections, he has begun to acknowledge the truth with both honesty and grace. Esther was tough because she cared, he admitted, expressing a new appreciation for her convictions. Their tension, he now realizes, wasn't personal. It was rooted in their fundamentally different visions of what the show could and should be. Though they never reconciled before Rolle's passing in 1998, Walker now credits her with keeping the show grounded and giving it moral weight. She made good times matter, he says. She gave it a soul. In finally honoring Esther Rolle, Jimmie Walker isn't just settling the record. He's paying tribute to a woman whose vision helped shape a legacy, and acknowledging his own growth in understanding the deeper meaning behind the laughs. At 78, Jimmie Walker stands not just as a television icon, but as a man who has lived a life on his own terms. Flawed, funny, fiercely independent, and finally, unfiltered. From the housing projects of the Bronx to the bright lights of Hollywood, he carved a path that defied expectations, broke barriers, and brought joy to millions. But what truly defines him now is not the fame of J.J. Evans or the thunder of Dy-no-mite. It's his willingness to reflect, to acknowledge, and to grow. In telling the truth about Esther Rolle, about his politics, his solitude, and his journey through an ever-changing industry, Walker offers something deeper than nostalgia: perspective. He has reached a point in life where clarity replaces ego, where honesty carries more weight than applause. By revisiting the past with open eyes, he gives meaning to the laughter and substance to the struggle. In honoring the people and moments that shaped him, Jimmie Walker reclaims his narrative, not just as a performer, but as a man unafraid to look back and finally say what mattered most.